Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Bruin, brought to you by our friends over at Ice Shaker. Check them out at iceshaker.com. So much to go over with these guys, but we will actually be giving a Bruins one away later on. Not necessarily tonight's episode, but next week for sure. Just got confirmation that we will be giving this one away. So be sure to check them out at iceshaker.com. I am your host, Chris Nozick, joined as I am every episode by Dom Tiano. Dom, how are you this week?
Doing good, Chris. Is this where I come to complain that the Bruins weren't in on Mikko Rantanen?
I mean, I won't stop you from feeling a certain way about it, but let's be honest, the Bruins really weren't going to pay that kind of price for someone who had no term.
Well, yeah, I know, but I was being sarcastic because I'm getting the complaints.
Oh, I know. Oh, so many places to start. Let's see. Since last time we were on the air, we've had the win against San Jose, the loss against the Devils, and the win against the win against Ottawa, and now yesterday's win against Colorado. It's been continued roller coaster. I want to shout out everyone who is already in the chat. Jason, JD. I'm not sure what the actual username is, but the one displaying is Cam Neely and Don Sweeney need to be fired. Thank you for jumping in. Matrix is now in the chat as well. Dom, do you want to start by going over a couple of the games first?
Kind of what we saw. Not really much to go over, Chris. They're 4-1-1 in their last 6, but have you seen anything in those 6 games that makes you feel good about a playoff run? And if you answer yes, you are lying.
No. The only thing I like about the 4-1-1, as you said, is it's 4 wins, 1 loss, and 1 overtime loss. The record is the only good thing about it, and the play of Jeremy Swayman has been fantastic overall. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, right now during the regular season, the most important thing is that they win games.
Yeah.
There's still how many games? Let's see. Out of 52, they've played 51. Or they got 31 games left where they can right in the ship.
Yeah.
So there's still time to do it.
I'm not writing them off in terms of a playoff spot. I'm not. Right now they're in 3rd place in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, other teams have games in hand, but remember what I started preaching a few weeks ago. Games in hand mean nothing unless you win them.
Yep.
A few weeks ago, Tampa was a point behind with 5 games in hand. They are still a point behind, but with only 3 games in hand. Those games in hand come to divisional opponents, where the Tampa Bay Lightning have the worst record, yes, even worse than Buffalo, against teams within their own division. Mm-hmm. So I know people are going to start talking about games in hand, but they mean nothing until they're won. Now, that said, if the next 31 games gets them into the playoffs, great. But I would not be spending any assets, future assets, in terms of draft picks and young prospects to add to this roster for this season.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment overall. And you were talking about the Lightning. The other thing with their schedule is they have a lot of back-to-backs still with travel. They have at least 4 or 5 sets of back-to-backs the rest of the way, and they all come with travel. So, yes, I know points percentage and stuff like that, but there's still 31 games. So the points percentage is going to change as those get played. So we got comments flying in. Love it here. I wouldn't be paying anything significant to improve the roster. If you can get, let's say, an early 2nd round pick or late first round pick, which is essentially an early second rounder for a guy like Trent Frederick, and then you can flip that for a potential 22-year-old or 24-year-old who's not in the American Hockey League and is kind of unsure what the next move is at the end of a contract, and you might be able to re-sign him. Okay, I wouldn't really call that adding to this team, but I wouldn't be sitting here unless you're swinging for the fences and going for a guy like Elias Pettersson. There's really no point. Let's see. I want to get caught up on some of these comments, though. We've got some real good ones here. Matrix was at the game on Saturday. Points out they played slow and flat-footed for 2 periods and brought it for the third. We did actually have a question on HF Boards about the speed of the game. Can you just talk a little bit about, because Colorado is known as a very fast-paced team. The Bruins clearly very slow to start that game, and just kind of like what it means between the straightforward speed, the different kinds.
Yeah, I know the question.
Yeah.
There's 2 kinds of speeds. There's skating speed, which is what Colorado has, and then there's puck speed. I've been watching hockey since the mid-'60s. Have yet to see a hockey player, Bobby Orr, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, you name it. I have yet to see a hockey player skate as fast as the puck. Never seen it. I will tell you, the way to beat a fast skating team is with a fast puck moving team. Unfortunately, the Bruins have neither. But you shouldn't be afraid of a fast skating team. There are ways to beat them, and that's instead of going a 2-1-2, you go a 1-2-2, clog up the neutral zone. Don't let them get that speed. There are several effective ways of beating a hockey team that skates fast. But the best way to beat them is by moving the puck fast, because they can't catch up to the puck.
Yeah.
I keep getting I don't know what the word is, taken off track by Cam Neely there. Cam, slow down with your responses, because we're not going to respond to most of them.
Yeah. Let's see. Shots on goal. Bruins can't create for shit, which they're getting some chances in there. Says trade anyone not named Laura or Matt Poitras, which, yes, Pastrnak would get an unbelievable return, but you're not dealing him. You're just not. Brett, from our friends over at Only Bruins, says, with Swayman and the top line carrying the team for 1-1, I still believe you retool and let the kids play as a result, as the results wouldn't be very different. Let's see. Mike says, best case scenario is to soft sell and still make the playoffs and get the kids some experience. Sweeney has always been good at trading. I'm worried about drafting. Brett, we're going to talk all about the prospects on tomorrow's show, and really just the draft history that Sweeney has isn't as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Dom, any immediate thoughts, or do we want to just save that mostly for tomorrow's show?
Yeah. Draft picks and prospect pools have to be related to where they are picking. And Brett, I made this argument last week. You may have missed it. When you're trading picks away to win championships or be competitive, you're not going to win a prospect ranking. You're not going to win a draft. However, if you're grabbing one of the 3 top players in the 3rd round, one of the 3 top players in the 4th round, one of the top 3 players in the 5th round, you're winning those rounds. And that's all you can expect to do when you're trading your firsts and your seconds away.
Yeah. Brett adds in, I don't hate Sweeney's drafting. I just think he's good with trades. Brett, I think you'll tune in tomorrow. We'll talk a lot more about the prospects. That'll probably make you feel a little bit better about it overall. Michael's got a good question because they've gone through some injuries, which we'll dive into in a minute here. But you've got Vinny Lettieri playing, and Max Jones has been called up. What are your thoughts on how they've been playing lately?
They're fine. They're fillers. They're nothing there for anymore. Nothing else. I know everybody wanted Lysell called up instead of the two. But remember, he was sick. He missed a couple of Providence games. Lysell will get his chance. He will get his chance. Right now, they've got, for lack of a better term, some cap manipulating to be done because of the McAvoy and Lindholm injuries. And because of those two, they need defensemen more than they need forwards right now. Once everybody is back and healthy, I think you'll see Lysell and Merkulov get their chance.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the guys who are injured on the front end, Mark Costello, Cole Koepke, that is not a call-up for a guy like Fabian Lysell. You're not going to put him in that role. And I get it. You can shift other things around. But, I mean, we're not splitting up that top line with Geekie, Zacha, and Pastrnak right now. That's your best line. And really, to what degree are you going to call up Merkulov? I get it. He's tearing it up, but you already have guys up here and you can continue to let him develop without sacrificing more organizational depth.
Let's give Joe Sacco credit for something that Jim Montgomery refused to do. Montgomery failed to let players develop chemistry, whereas Sacco, keeping Geekie, Zacha, and Pastrnak together, even when it wasn't working, until they formed the chemistry where it is now and is working, he deserves some credit for that. And I think he's doing the same with Patra, Marchand, that
Coyle
pair, and doesn't want to break them up and go back to Lindholm and Marchand because he saw Lindholm and Marchand wasn't working. He has to give Patra a bit more time to see if there's something there.
Yeah, and a great example, like you said, is Morgan Geekie. Last year, he had 39 points in 76 games, and he had only 4 in the first 13 games this year. After Montgomery was fired, I think it was a 5-game stretch where he didn't put up a point. But in that time, he was tried on the second line, he was tried on the third line, he was tried on the first line. And then after, I think it was 3 games of kind of moving him around, he stuck on the first line. And then after that, it was like 2 or 3 games. And then in the last 27 games, he's got 22 points. So they found the chemistry. I completely agree with you on that. They have been letting people play chemistry together and try to find it, even on the defensive end. They're trying anyway. It doesn't help that, McAvoy goes down as soon as you get a little healthier. You get Lindholm close to returning, and then you get another injury. So injuries dictate some of that as well. So Kevin has joined. Welcome aboard, Kevin. Dom, did you say you had something for Kevin?
Yeah, I was thinking about the show and thought of Kevin eating, so I went to Wendy's for bacon portobello mushroom melt and some poutine, and that got me through, Kevin.
There you go, Kevin. Let's see. Michael adds, Elias Lindholm has been really good on draws. Should the average fan acknowledge this more than they tend to? How much of an impact does winning those draws have on the team's success? Thoughts on Elias Lindholm? Let's dive into him a little bit.
Look, I've said it plenty of times now with him and Zadorov. On their third team, 4th head coach, 4 different systems in the last, 16 months?
If that, if not less.
If not less. In a year. Oh, it's been a year.
Yeah.
So 12 months. Some players just need time, and Zadorov is just starting to come around. Hopefully, Lindholm does, but a lot of times it takes time for a player going to a new organization. As I said, it's Lindholm's third, three different systems, third one with a coaching change through the year. So four systems just not clicking for him.
Yeah, and let's also, take it back to when he was traded from Calgary to Vancouver. It took him almost 2 months to finally get completely under him. And I know we're past the 2 months at that point already in the season, but if it was just the first move and he was going from Calgary to Vancouver, he's moving himself, his entire family from Vancouver to Boston. It's going to take even longer for that adjustment. So
yeah, listen, I know fans like to complain and say this guy sucks and that guy sucks and this guy's useless and that guy's useless. I'll tell you, here's my opinion. They're professional athletes, so they don't suck. Unless you can go in and do better, they don't suck. They did something right to get there. I don't think they're a talentless bunch. What I do think, from top to bottom, that this team lacks chemistry. They might not be the right players to fit together. And to me, that's what I see as the biggest issue.
Yeah, the chemistry is just not there for so many of them, and that's one of the things that, like you said, Joe Sacco is working on letting them sort it out, and he's trying to see where there is chemistry and then kind of where there isn't. I think Vinny Lettieri is playing really well in the positions that he is being put in, and I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks around, even after everybody gets healthy.
There's no room for him.
That would be the only thing, but as you get closer to the trade deadline, I mean, Wahlstrom is probably on his way out. I don't see him getting a lot of time, and there's just not a lot of chemistry there with anybody. Frederick, he seems to already have a foot out the door. So if both of them somehow depart the organization, whether it be via trade or waivers or whatever, Vinny Lettieri could stay up.
Assume there's no trades, Chris.
Well, that's just it. If there's none, then
yeah. Until a trade happens, it hasn't happened. Okay. Well, once Koepke and once Kastelic get healthy, if they're on your roster, Lettieri and Wahlstrom have to go down. Wahlstrom will need waivers.
Wahlstrom was the next one I was going to ask you about. What do you think?
I'll tell you. No, let me finish. I'll tell you why. Because Callahan can go back down, but they sure as hell aren't going to put Parker Waterspoon or Jordan Osterley on waivers at this point when Lindholm and McAvoy get healthy. So this team is going to carry 8D13 forwards. Yeah. So Wahlstrom and Lettieri are gone once Kastelic and Koepke are healthy.
Well, I was going to ask you about Wahlstrom and obviously Koepke. I mean, Wahlstrom hasn't really done very much. You think right now he's just filling in that role until they put him on waivers when those guys get healthy?
It depends on who the Bruins want on the roster. I can't for the life of me see keeping Lettieri or Wahlstrom in favor of Koepke and Kastelic. I can't.
Well, no, I mean, Kastelic is clearly, going to replace
stranger things have happened.
Fair enough. Let's see. Big Bad Bruin Joe jumping in says Lettieri works his ass off. Jones more physical than Beecher as a fourth line, but Beecher has been good at the PK and on the dot. Kevin's proud of you for the beverage. He also adds in, if Morgan Geekie continues the rest of the season, I'm extending him and anointing him a top 6 forward. He's young enough where he can still grow to be that. Do you think Morgan Geekie has what it takes to maintain being a top 6 forward?
On this team, yes.
Okay. Obviously not necessarily on an all-star team, but Is it simply because he has the chemistry he has with Zaga and Pastrnak?
Exactly. Move him someplace else. Move him to another contender. He's not a top 6 forward.
Let's see. He says, and I see a lot of people saying to trade Geekie, but those same people will be looking for a young goal scorer and expect to find it in free agency. I agree. I think what you're seeing from Morgan Geekie, I put this out there the other day on X, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, Dom, because Pasta's 28. He signed through 2031. Zaka's 27. He's signed through 2027, and Geekie is 26, and he's signed as an RFA through the end of this year. Is that a line you want them to keep together long term, i.e., at least through 2031, Pasta's last year of his deal?
2031 is too long to way too long to commit to Morgan Geekie.
Would you try to get him through 2027 at a
Yes.
minimum?
To me, that would be the maximum.
That would be the maximum. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a 3-year deal. I can't picture myself offering Morgan Geekie more than a 3-year deal.
Would you consider that quote unquote long term?
No.
Okay.
Long term to me is a 7 or 8 year deal. Midterm is short term is 1 or 2, and a midterm is 3 to 6.
Fair enough. I remember when people were bitching that he was put up on that first line left wing position, and they wanted him out of there. He's not a top liner, and now he's the praise of the town.
I remember when people wanted him traded.
People still want him traded
for nothing.
People still want him traded. Okay, so that brings me to this. The reason why I was asking about the length of the contract for Geekie. All right, I'm sure you're familiar with AFP analytics.
Never pay attention to it.
Well, they recently came out with some contract projections for some of the Bruins, and I know you haven't seen these numbers. I don't agree with any of them, and I don't think you will either. They have Morgan Geekie projected to get a 4-year contract with a $3.25 million AAV. Thoughts on that? Would you give it to him?
I would give it to him.
I would too. I feel like
even though I said I wouldn't go more than 3 years. But at 3.2 million, that's lower money than I was expecting. So yeah, I would definitely give him that.
That's what I mean. If you're able to get him at a lower number like that, I mean, that's what, 15 million over 4 years. That is a reasonable contract for that player. I would rather do a 2 or 3 year deal. And if that means you're up to 3.5, okay, I guess. But that one in particular, I'm okay with. I just not a huge fan of the term. And I don't think that's what he'll get either, depending on where that goes. They have Mason Lohrei projected to get a 2-year, $3 million AAV deal.
I'd do it.
I would do it, but do you think that's what Mason Lohrei would be expecting? Do you think he would take that deal? Do you think Mason Lohrei would take that deal?
If I was Mason Lohrei, I would do a 1-year deal.
And what would you be asking for at that point if you're Lohrei?
Same money.
Same money. Okay. They have Brad Marchand taking a 3-year by $7.5 million AAV contract.
Nope.
Which I think we talked about it last week. I mean, he's going to do 1 year at a time with whatever's left over.
I will say this about Brad Marchand. Ready? Because this is a Dom bomb.
Oh, I wish I had a graphic for that readily available.
2 Western Conference contenders have. I want to be careful how I word this. Have approached Cam Neely and said, if Brad Marchand is made available, in other words, if Brad Marchand agrees to be traded, to not make a deal until he contacts them because they want in.
Fair enough. I don't blame him. I'm sure Cam responds with Avs want him bad. I'm sure the Avs are a team that would be very interested in him, especially after dealing away Mikko Rantanen. So I would definitely keep an eye on that. But I don't think Marchand really wants to go anywhere. So
Can you see Brad Marchand playing for a former coach?
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas was the other team as well. You said former coach, so immediately I go to Bruce Cassidy. So, but let's not
Oh,
forget.
Jim Montgomery's a former
I
coach
was gonna
too.
say Jim Montgomery, and they also have Claude Julien on that bench.
Hmm.
So, but as far as contenders, that would make sense. I could definitely see Vegas wanting in, and I could definitely see Colorado wanting in and saying, don't deal them until you talk to us, at least. So Kevin says, you know where I stand with trading Marchand. Do it. You'll easily fetch a first plus. You have to see what they're offering and what they have available. But, I mean, easily. At least one of those teams would be offering it. Real quick, just to round out the other contracts, would you give Trent Frederick a 4-year, 3.9 AAV contract?
Four-year, 3.9 for Trent Frederick.
And do you think Frederick would take that deal?
I would give it to him. I don't think Frederick would take it.
That was my thought. I feel like another team would also potentially be willing to offer him more or the same money for maybe 3 years. I don't think the 4-year term is what he's going to get right now. He's been too inconsistent. 1.4 AAV over 2 years for Justin Brazeau.
No, I want a 1-year deal.
That was my thinking too. And I'm not sure if Brazeau's going to go for 2 years. I'm not sure he's going to take a 1.4 year
No.
AAV deal.
To me, if it's more than 1 year, it has to be for less than what can be buried in the American Hockey League if need be.
Yeah. And then the last one, at least for the NHL guys, Johnny Beecher, 2 years at 1.76 million AAV.
What?
2 years at 1.76 million AAV.
No. You want to sign your qualifying offer of 874,000 JB? Here it is.
Yeah, that was my thought. Wait. I mean, if another team is willing to make that offer for him, that should be over the draft pick compensation. Take it. Let's see. Cam has a question. We were just talking about Freddie. How much do you think Freddie actually gets? Feels like he's really hurt his value this year. Depends on the team offering him the deal. I think St. Louis really wants him. I think he really wants to go there, so they'll find some common ground. It just seems to be the two magnets going towards each other right now.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an enigma. It really is.
Something.
I can't get past that 1.74 for Beecher. That's more than Kostelic.
Right? I know. And this came out after the Kostelic contract. So, like, there was not that. Yeah, no, I agree. It would be a no from me. But I just thought that would be a fun little thing to run through. And then we were talking about the games earlier. Did you see? I know we were talking a little bit about it. Did you see the statistic that Ty Anderson posted the other day about Korpisalo and his starts after a loss?
No.
I'll read it exactly as he wrote it here. He wrote, one thing that I think has been really underrated about Korpisalo this year has been his ability to help stop potential bleeding. The Bruins have turned to him 11 times after a loss this season. His record in that spot, 8-1-2 with a 915 save percentage.
Good for Corpy. If I'm the Bruins, I'm looking to move him before the draft.
Before the draft or before the trade deadline?
Before the draft.
Okay, so you hang on to him through this year.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of the contract projections, we do have two guys down in the American Hockey League who need new deals. So if you are able to move Korpisalo come the draft time, are you looking at DiPietro to try and be your number 2 next year?
No, I'm finding a cheaper NHL backup.
They're going to be out there. I agree with you. And there's plenty of teams that are going to need starters going in, or at least bona fide starters. Michael asks, do we know when Hampus or Charlie might be coming back? I haven't heard anything on a time frame. Let's see. What else have we got here, Dom? Where do you want to go next?
I don't know. Cam's question there.
I was just going to say, I'm going to pull up Cam's question. We probably already talked about this, but how long until Merkulov and Lysell get a legit chance in Boston? I'm talking a 10-plus game stint.
When the team is healthy.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if they're going to get the 10-plus games that we're looking for, unless they make a move and there's an opening that there's full-time available. And I'm okay with that. I like what they're doing down in Providence. They're developing. I know, I think someone sent out something on Twitter the other day asking about Patrick Brown. I think it was Brett. If you're still watching, I think you were involved in it, or maybe it was Sully if he's watching, about what Patrick Brown brings to the team. And I really like what he's done with helping those young kids in Providence mature. And I think we're seeing that with a guy like Letary, what the time can do for him. Max Jones, obviously his game looks way better than it did in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to confirm any of this? Matrix says, I've heard the Flyers have shown good interest in Korpisalo.
Not that I've heard. I don't think the Bruins are intent on moving Korpisalo before the season is over. I mean, if something happens to Swayman, you can kiss the season goodbye anyway. But if something happens to Swayman and you don't have Korpisalo, you can really kiss the season away.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thinking. At least with Korpisalo, you've seen what he can do. He is an NHL goaltender. You ride with Korpisalo and DiPietro until Swayman gets back if something were to happen, and that you might be okay. I feel like what we're seeing right now, the inconsistencies in the team, the results, the win a couple, lose a couple, up and down, that kind of thing. I feel like that's where we would be right now if we had Korpisalo and DiPietro all season as the 1-2 combo. Like, we'd still be roughly where we are.
I don't know about that. Swayman's stolen a couple of games in the last couple of weeks.
He has. Yeah, he really has, though. Colorado, he kept him in that one. What did you think of the dud game against the Devils? Would you call that one of the worst games, if not the worst game of the season so far?
Well, I don't know. I could think a lot of them. Winnipeg,
Dallas.
You know, when you watch that team, you ask yourself again, is this team worth investing in? And the answer has to be no. Even the game yesterday against Colorado, they won, yeah. But is it worth investing in? Swayman had to make one big save that whole game, and it was the first shot he faced. Andy Brickley talked about it several times yesterday. Okay, so he didn't steal you the game. But you almost lost it by your own play.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's see here. This kind of goes in. I'll pull these two up together. Cam says, what type of moves are you expecting the Bruins to make by the deadline? I feel like this is one of those odd years where we really don't know what's going to happen. And then David follows up with JT Miller or Elias Pettersson from the Canucks. Would the Bruins make a move to acquire one of them?
Okay, go back to the first one.
Yeah.
Go to Dom.Hockey. I wrote it today on what the Bruins should do. Because otherwise I'm going to be talking about it for an hour, but you can read it in less than 5 minutes.
Now, there is one thing in that article that I wanted to ask you about real quick.
Shoot.
You have a 1-sentence paragraph where you wrote, GM Don Sweeney hasn't been heard from.
Right. Who's doing all the talking?
Not Don.
Charlie Jacobs and Cam Neely.
What do you think that means?
I don't know what it means.
That's why I said, what do you think it means?
I'm just putting it out there.
I genuinely think he is actually doing what he is supposed to. He is making phone calls. He has a general idea of where certain guys are as far as their availability. And I think he's doing his due diligence to stay in touch on certain situations. I'm sure he probably had an ear to the ground that Mikko Rantanen was available. Now, the Bruins did not have a shot at putting together a package that would have gotten Mikko Rantanen. So get that out of your minds altogether. What would be the equivalent of what was given up, aside from the picks? It was Natchez and Drury. So
Pastrnak.
Yeah. And that would have just been pointless. Give up Pastrnak to get Rantanen.
Let's go back because you skipped ahead.
To this one?
No. When you were speaking, you go on different topics all the time, and I don't get a chance to. So go back to Sweeney and Neely.
Yep.
Okay. And you came to Sweeney's defense. Should have stopped there. And I should have said to you, since 2015, approaching trade deadline, have Charlie Jacobs and Cam Neely come out to do the speaking for the team and not Don Sweeney? Think of a year, but it won't come to you because it never happened. Remember, this year there are 2 trade deadlines, the Four Nations and the actual trade deadline.
Yeah.
When I wrote that article, I had a member of the Bruins media message me and say I had to laugh at that sentence, that Don Sweeney has been quiet. Said he had to laugh because Don Sweeney is the worst GM in the NHL at talking to the media. I disagree because when Don Sweeney has to speak, he does. But to have Charlie Jacobs and Cam Neely come out and do the speaking is saying something to me.
What is it saying to you?
Well, it doesn't matter. Everybody has to make up their own minds as to what it means.
Okay. Let's get caught up on a couple more of these comments and questions here, and then there's something else I wanted to try and drag out of you here. Boston G24 says, hey, fellas, curious on thoughts. Do you think Poitras is up for good for the rest of the season or his second demotion imminent?
I think Sacco wants to give him more time with Marchand, but the easiest move to make to bring up Lysell and Merkulov is to send Poitras down because he doesn't need waivers.
Yeah, and he's someone who doesn't like. If you approach him and say, "Hey, we're going to send you down. We're going to call up Lysell," whatever. Like he's just going to go down to Providence, bust his ass, and still be a solid player. He's not going to take it as the team no longer believes in me or any of that. So like he is
You
someone that
don't. You
could
do
do
not
that.
have to give Matthew Poitras excuses.
No.
Trust me.
Kevin says, I've decided I'm out on both Pedersen and JT Miller. Let's see.
JT Miller, I'm out of because it doesn't answer the future of the franchise. It might for a year or two, but that's it. Pedersen, if I could work out a deal, I would.
Yeah, and I think I'm with Kevin on this one. If I had to speculate, it's because Sweeney is busy with the Four Nations stuff. He does have that on his plate still, so it might.
What's he busy with? The roster's named.
Well, we're already starting to see some players pull out from it. Alex Pietrangelo just pulled out of it. I think it was today. Then you've got goaltending issues with. Markstrom now is injured, and one of the other goaltenders is not going to be there anymore either. And they're not necessarily all on his roster, but there's still follow-up and other players that he's probably got to check on for their availability. So, again, is it the only reason? No, but we do have Court jumping in as well. Welcome, Court. And he says Four Nations is going to be a big one. I don't know if Court, just clarify, are you referring to as a reason why he may not be?
No, he's talking about trades.
Oh, trade. Well, then he adds on Pietrangelo isn't playing in the Four Nation. Who replaces him on?
Yeah,
D
but
for Canada?
when he made that comment about Four Nations, we were talking about the 2 trade deadlines.
I'm with you, Court, on this one. Cam Neely needs to be fired, not Sweeney. Let's see. Jason says
I've been saying that since 2015, Court.
Jason says the last time I remember Neely making comments like that, Chiarelli got fired. Sorry, I wanted to go a little bit in order. Michael asks, why is the Bruins passing not as crisp as other teams? Is it system related where they're not on the ice, not ideal position, or where they are on the ice and not ideal positioning? Or is it just a lack of focus on the player's part?
I think it's a lack of focus and the types of players. Lindholm and McAvoy will make a big difference to it.
Oh, absolutely. Kevin says get Ranton in and have to dish out another 11 to $12 million contract. No thanks. DM says, hey guys, do you see trade activity heating up before Four Nations? Hearing teams liking this idea to help acclimatize incoming players. I've heard the same.
Yes, I think there will be. There was a question earlier about waiving Wallstrom and Jones.
Yep, this one right here from Cam.
Jones does not need waivers. He's already cleared waivers once, so he can be called up for 10 games or 30 days cumulative on the roster and be sent back down without requiring waivers.
Yeah, but Wallstrom is definitely someone that I could see them waiving once everybody's healthy, or like you said, once the forwards get healthy. Even Michael, he says, love seeing Dan Zlotchmelis have a big weekend. Michael, we are going to be talking about Dan Zlotchmelis a lot tomorrow when we talk about all the prospects, but it is always nice to see them. Michael with the question, do GMs attend Four Nations? Do you think the GMs will be there?
Oh, yeah. I think it's in Montreal and Boston. It's not like it's overseas. They're going to be there.
I feel like any deals that aren't done before Four Nations are going to be heavily discussed. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when 32 GMs get in a room together? They're all going to have different conversations.
And there's only one game. They've got 21 other hours to kill.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. David says, fire Neely. Who would you replace him with?
Christ, I'd replace him with you, Dave.
I mean, yeah.
It doesn't take, as long as you know business, you can be a GM of hockey operations. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know hockey because that's what you have a general manager for. The unfortunate part is when you have players like Cam Neely or Brendan Shanahan, or I was going to say Luke Robitaille, but no.
What about
But
Ron Francis?
when you have players in a president's capacity there that like to get involved in the day-to-day managing of the team, which is what you have a general manager for, things don't work out for you.
I like Court's idea. Sean Thornton can replace him.
Actually, he can.
I know. I like that idea. I wouldn't really be against it, to be honest with you. He's been involved in the business side of things for a while down in Florida. I'd love to see him come back, and it wouldn't be the worst thing. Like you said, he'd let the GM do the GM things. Cam says, what do you guys think of Brazeau lately? Why is he on the fourth line? I feel like all his positive attributes are being outweighed by his line mates.
I was hoping that the Justin Brazeau talk wouldn't come up. Because I know he's a fan favorite to a large portion of the fan base.
Oh, are you
I will
better
say
drop another Dom bomb here?
No, there are teams that are interested in him. I can guarantee you that. I will say this. Justin Brazeau, it's not that the fourth line hurts Justin Brazeau. It's that Justin Brazeau hurts the fourth line. He's not a fourth line player on this Bruins team with Beecher or Kostelik on it that are all about speed and getting in on the forecheck. Okay? So it's not about them hurting Brazeau's game. It's about Brazeau taking away from the fourth line. Brazeau should be to Marchand, and whether it's Lindholm or Pastrnak on the line, what Morgan Geekie is to Zaka and Pastrnak. He had his chance there with Lindholm and Marchand. It didn't really work out. My issue with Brazeau, and trust me, I've watched this guy play 4 years for the North Bay Battalion in the Ontario Hockey League. Long before the Toronto, what's their AHL team called? Marlies signed him and then let him go, and the Bruins signed him. And the issue with Justin Brazeau was the same way back then as it is today. Justin Brazeau does not put the effort in to improve his game when needed. I mean, and by that I mean putting in the work in the off season, going out and getting his own skating coach, where we saw the likes of Kevin Miller do in Boston, or Milan Lucic do in Boston, or what's his name? They signed out of St. Louis that everybody wanted gone. Help me, Chris.
This year?
No, they signed out a few years ago. They traded
David Backes.
David Backes. We saw him do in Boston in the off season. One off season, go out, get a power skating coach, work on your skating, and come back the next season much improved. Brazeau does not have that in him. Never has, never will. Because he could be a better hockey player than he is today. That's my issue with Justin Brazeau. He's not strong on his feet. Everybody talks about Matt Pastrnak being knocked on his ass. I've told you, I've told Court, I've told other people in private and say, go count how many times in a game Matthew Poitras is picking himself up off his ass on the ice and count how many times Justin Brazeau is picking his ass up off the ice, and you'll be surprised at the results. We talked about it, about Brazeau in the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
he's improved from the playoffs from last year, but that doesn't make him a top six forward or a middle six forward.
But if you're not willing to put in the work when you can, I don't want you on my team.
Yeah.
And that's the issue I have with Justin Brazeau. Not that he's not a good hockey player. The fact that he can be better and doesn't put in the effort to be better.
Yeah, and I'm with Michael right here. Brazeau doesn't want to put the effort in and then get rid of him. Yeah, I think right now he sticks around. He's got a role on the team. As Matrix says, that he's extremely slow and ineffective most of the time, but he's good on the power play in front of the net. Right now, your power play is meager at best, and he really helps your second unit. So there's still a role for him, but there's a reason why, even though Lindholm got moved down in favor of Poitras to skate with Marchand, Brazeau did not get another opportunity with Marchand because Brazeau does not work the same way Coyle does. So Coyle, Poitras, and Marchand, I like that better than Marchand, Poitras, Brazeau.
Definitely.
Although, like you said, he should be the guy on that line.
He should be what Morgan Geekie. He should be to that line what Morgan Geekie is to the first line.
You could also make the case that Trent Frederick should be that too, but that's a whole nother.
Well, the question wasn't asked of Trent Frederick. It was asked of Justin Brazeau. There's my issue. People are going to shit on me for saying it, but I've been watching him a lot longer than anybody else. And a matter of fact, I wrote it in his draft year, his first draft year, that was the issue I had with him, and it still exists today.
Now, this is what Kevin says in response. He says he improved from last year, so I give him the opportunity to see what he works on this upcoming offseason and see if he continues to get better. Thoughts on, because that would ultimately mean bringing him back for another season. Kevin, I think that's where Dom and I are in agreement that you offer him a 1-year contract that's variable in the American Hockey League, because if he stays status quo with where he is, you don't want to have him committed to 2 or 3 years. You want to be able to send him off into the sunset and say thanks, but no thanks.
My honest opinion, Kevin, is I trade him while his value is high or highest, which is right now, because based on past experiences, I know what kind of work he's going to put in the offseason.
Yeah. I mean, just because he improved from last year to this year, though.
What's really improved, though? What's improved from last year to this year?
He just a little bit in the board battles. Honestly, not a lot. And I'm not even saying it's a drastic improvement.
I think it's status quo.
Maybe it's just because I was so hard on him last year. I feel like he's gotten a little bit better, but again, incrementally better. I think we've seen, and I know he's more of a Monday topic, but I think we've seen a greater increase in skating ability from Christian Konstantinsky last year to this year than we have in Justin Brazeau from last year to this year. I think we've seen the results of one guy putting in the work and one guy who's not putting in the work. So I'm with you 100,000%. If you have teams calling you on Justin Brazeau, get the best deal you can for him. I don't even care if it's a draft pick, because I don't think he's going to put in the work this offseason to continually get better. I'd rather invest my time, effort, and energy into the guys that will put the work in, who will go above and beyond there. Kevin says you could possibly get a third for him. I don't know what his value would be, but I would take any draft pick for him. I think a third would be
Definitely.
reasonable.
Definitely. You may even get a late second.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about the teams that would be going for him, I mean, you're talking about your playoff bound teams, so they would be a bottom half of the second round draft. So you very easily should be able to get something like that. And no, that's just not going to happen. Brazeau and Marchand for Natchez. No. David, I'm not really sure I'm willing to do that because if his value plummets, I wouldn't really want to say I gave him another season because people are already talking about dealing Geekie when he's high in trade value, not wanting to let Trent Frederick walk for nothing because they did that with Torrey Krug, they did it with Jake DeBrusk, they've done it, a couple other times. If you're willing to trade Trent Frederick, why aren't you willing to trade Justin Brazeau, who probably right now could get you more? Just based on how they're playing. DM asks thoughts on Peak and Wotherspoon. Guys are playing some excellent hockey.
I think they're playing well. I think we're finally starting to see Jay Leach rub off on some of these guys.
Yeah. Would you look at trading either one of them once you get fully healthy on defense? Given the fact that we're seeing Osterley able to step up and be serviceable, given the fact that we've seen Callahan be serviceable, those guys could potentially fetch you something at the deadline.
Look, I'm open to trading anybody. Everybody has a price, including David Pastrnak, including Jeremy Swayman, including Charlie McAvoy. So I'm not going to say no. That's always been my opinion. Am I openly, actively shopping them? No. But if someone comes calling, I'm going to listen on everybody.
Fair enough. That would be my response too. What's the return coming back? So Matrix says Peak has been excellent. One player that I would not trade. Again, it depends on what you're getting for him, Matrix. I understand the desire not to trade him, but I mean, with where this team is, you have to at least consider it. Let's see. And then it was Cam says, what do you think could be a realistic move the Bees do to make at the deadline?
I don't know. Realistically, if it were me, Cam, I'm not investing in this team. I'm not. Make a hockey trade for Trent Frederick that benefits me next year. Okay, I'm listening.
Would you be okay if Don Sweeney does nothing at the trade deadline?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I wasn't done.
No, but you said nothing. Well, how could you possibly add to that? Go ahead, finish.
Well, I was going to say he re-signs Morgan Geekie, John Beecher, and Mason Lohrei, and then also Brad Marchand to a 1 year or something. Keeps all of his draft picks. Ultimately, you lose Trent Frederick and possibly Koepke, but you're able to then next year influx guys like Poitras, Merkulov, and then obviously over the course of the remainder of the season, you're able to call up some of those guys from Providence.
Well, that's not doing nothing except the 15 things you listed.
It's doing nothing at the trade deadline.
Oh, no, because I would not accept that, because in your list, you didn't include signed Trent Frederick. You absolutely, with this roster, this team that is going nowhere, hold on to Trent Frederick as your own rental in the hopes that you can sign him in the offseason. That is absolutely pure bad asset management.
What if you genuinely think you can get a deal done, and then it turns out you can't?
Get a deal done. If you cannot get a deal done, he's gone.
Okay, I'm with you.
You cannot have another Jake DeBrusk situation here where Trent Frederick, who can get you assets that can help you in the future, but is not going to be a make or break for your team this year because it's not going anywhere. You cannot hold on to him as your own rental.
Sorry, Kevin's comment. I'm glad we can make him laugh. Let's see. David says Bruins made it to the second round last season. Invest. I don't know if David's being sarcastic or not on that. I leave the door open for it. Unless, see, I'm with you. I would use the Four Nations as a trade deadline type, and then I would also use the trade deadline as an actual deadline. If you can move Frederick for a piece or get something out of a boost between the Four Nations and the actual trade deadline, that's when you know that you should be investing. Even if that move comes as waiving Wahlstrom, sending a couple guys back down to Providence, and then cycling in guys like Merkulov and keeping Poitras around, Lysell, even if it's a spark from the kids at that point, that's when you know it might be worth investing or not come the March 7th deadline. Michael
this team is more than a Connor McDavid away from being worth being invested in. This team is more than a Connor McDavid away from being worth being invested in. So, David, tell me how you want to invest in this team.
Yeah, I right now I don't see it. Michael says, amazing how new scenery does for a player, i.e. Kako in Seattle and Kaliev in New York. Someone's got to be available for that move, though. Michael adds in, I would trade Carlo one way or another, considering his contract and injury history. Now is the time. This is the move to make at a minimum. I can't get behind trading Carlo unless it's part of an actual hockey trade where you're getting something decent in return. I know a team like Colorado has really liked him and wanted him. But after their move for Rantanen out, I don't know if they still have the appetite for something like that.
Carlo is an off-season move, if you ask me. Because if you move other pieces and are bringing up the likes of Lysell and bringing up the likes of Merkulov, maybe even a John Farinacci, Brandon Carlo is one of the two guys I would say you want on this roster to help bring them in simply because of his leadership. Laugh at me all you want. Make fun of me all you want. But next to Brad Marchand, Brandon Carlo is the guy I would want on this team to bring them in.
I mean, Brandon Carlo could very well easily have his name in the mix for the next C.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised. BG Chris McFarland traded Mikko Rantanen because he couldn't extend him to a number that he liked. Bruins have no excuse to move free agents they can't sign before the trade deadline.
Yep.
Again, yeah, I agree with the sentiment. We just have to see it happen here.
And Colorado's a contender.
Yes. And they're a contender, absolutely. Let's see. If you must trade Frederick and Brazeau, if not signed by the deadline, I would trade them both. I agree with that. Again, you got to figure out what you're getting first, obviously, as well. Let's see. The trade deadline acquisition is hopefully a healthy defense. Well, that would be helpful. Absolutely. Kevin says Carlos don't grow on trees. He has a good contract and is one of the better defensemen on the team. Carlo is needed. Kevin, I'd go so far as to say that Brandon Carlo is one of the best shutdown defensemen in the entire league.
But he doesn't put up points, so it's overrated.
Yep. So that's where we get comments like Carlos being overrated. So Colorado is absolutely a contender. Absolutely a contender. They have been in a wild card because their goaltending at the beginning of the season was absolute dog shit. They've redone the entire crease and bringing in Blackwood and Wedgwood and getting rid of it was Gorgiev and who was the other one? I'm not even. He's in Nashville now. They've redone their goaltending, and they've had some of the best goaltending in the league since. And they have been just skyrocketing up the standings despite other teams around them winning. Colorado is absolutely 1,000% a contender. You don't have to believe it, but they are going to be possibly a wild card team that no one in the West wants to face.
Exactly.
Let's see. Having Montgomery shit the bed was not a good beginning. That definitely set our team back for a little bit there. But the team wasn't playing well either. Carlo being overrated is wild. Yeah. I don't know which. I think he's talking about Colorado here. They are absolutely a contender. We're done on that one. Matrix says Lindholm-Carlo tandem is one of the best in the league when healthy. You don't trade Carlo. I mean, Brandon Carlo's played with more defensive partners than David Krejci had wingers. Brandon Carlo's not the problem. Like, he's just not the problem. So I wouldn't look to move Brandon Carlo, and he's got a couple years left on his deal, and he's still on the correct side of 30. So let's see. I think I'm going to decipher this one. This team is about to get Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy back, two top D-men. Do you think they significantly make the team more competitive?
I think they'll help. Absolutely.
Won't hurt having two guys who've been in Norris conversations for the last couple of years. Again, maybe not top 5 finishes, but they've been in the conversation one way or another. Realistically, that's not going to hurt any team. Michael, you absolutely can retool if you don't trade a Brandon Carlo. You absolutely can retool without him, without trading him. Trading Brandon Carlo in the middle of the season would be the beginning of an actual rebuild, not a retool. Does Carlo injury history give you pause? No. Not more than anybody else's. Cam says, do you think Calum Ritchie would be a piece the Bees would look at, especially if they did look to trade with Colorado?
I can tell you this. The Bruins know Calum Ritchie very, very well. Would they have interest? I don't know. Next time I bump into one of the Bruin scouts in the rink, I'll ask him what his thoughts were of Ritchie when he was available for the draft.
Now, I want to circle back to something that you wrote in our chat. You wrote this comment. You have some rumors for us.
I told you it already.
Which one?
The Marchand one.
Oh, I thought you had more than that.
Oh, well, no. The other one I told you last week was that there's this interest in Justin Brazil. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, the interest in Trent Frederick. So there's interest in 3 Bruins that we know of.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there was interest in more. Kevin's absolutely correct here. Brandon Carlo, 28. He's part of the core with Pasta, McAvoy, and Swayman. David says we have a good team. Invest. What's the cap space for next year? They got a pretty good cap room for next year, but they have some moves that they have to make, so it'll chip away pretty quick.
They have at least $20 million in cap space next year.
Yeah. Kevin says, David,
No, that's
probably a good
Court.
team. No, and then Court says, Dom, I mentioned Richie in my video I showed you that drops tomorrow. Ooh, check out
I'm looking
Court.
forward to it.
I will look forward to it as well. Court. Court, you're always welcome to jump on the show. So feel free to let me know if you want to jump on ever. Let's see. So who do you want to trade? Frederick isn't getting you much. I feel like Frederick's going to net more than people think. Let's see. The Carlo type discussion has been hard this season. They can't be traded because of their leadership value, etc. But players still have to be moved, and you can't expect to get positives for negative. That's an interesting comment to dissect here. And Ian follows it up with, so you're saying there's no deal for Carlo that you wouldn't take. No, Ian, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not what Dom's saying. Is, as Dom said, every player can be had for the right deal. It's not a deal that you typically see done during the season. And he is the type of player that you want to finish the year with if you have an influx of younger players coming. So trading him would be a very careful move to make. That's my point. Don't let me speak for you.
Yeah, to me, Brandon Carlo if you're trading Brandon Carlo, it's an off-season trade.
Court says Carlo is part of the leadership team in that room. Absolutely. Mike adds on, same can be said about Coyle, great leader, but things got to get shaken up. Thoughts on Charlie Coyle? I mean, there's a lot to be said about what he brings to the room off the ice. He's playing all right on the ice, but he is a piece that could fetch you something. Unlike Carlo, being that he's one of multiple forwards, is it easier to move on from Coyle midseason than it is Carlo?
Yes.
Would you move on from Coyle?
I think it's an off-season move. You have to be careful trading them in season because you're limited to the number of teams you can trade them to. When you make them available to 31 other teams, the price goes up. The return gets higher. So you have to be careful. And as I said with Carlo, if you're bringing up the kids like Lysell and Merkulov and maybe Farinacci, Brandon Carlo is the guy I want there to help him through these next couple of months. I could say the same thing about Charlie Coyle.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you weigh everything, including possible return, it's better off to wait on those guys till the off season when you have 31 other teams interested.
Yeah, unless you're going to get true market value, which most teams aren't going to do. Michael had asked, there was a comment that I'm going to zip back down for in a minute, but it reminded me of Michael's question from earlier. He said, when GMs think of first-round picks, how many years do they project before that player is on the roster? Same question for second, third, so on and so forth. There was a comment that came up about the positivity or negativity of making a deal. I'll find that one. But just thoughts on this one real quick here.
Depends on the player. It all depends on the player.
It was this one.
For example, you're not drafting a Michael Misa or a Martone or a Hagens thinking they're going to be 2-3 years away. You're thinking they're going to make the roster this year or this upcoming season. when you're drafting 15th, you're probably looking at 1 or 2 years. When you're drafting 25 to 30, you're probably thinking 2 to 3 years. But it all depends on the player.
Yeah, and then as you continue to get later, we talk a lot about that type of stuff on the prospect show on Mondays. This is the one. Do GMs really worry about dealing in the division or in the conference, or do they prefer just dealing with the other conference?
Again, depends on the caliber of player. Let's say Edmonton, for some unknown reason, was to trade Leon Draisaitl. They certainly don't want him. Definitely not in the division, and most probably not in the conference.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have to do what's best for your team and go where the best deal is. If that means Boston trades with Montreal, then so be it.
Some of them work out in your favor, i.e. Andrew Raycroft for Tuukka Rask, and some of them work out in both teams' favor. I mean, look at the Omar deal. That's worked out well for Ottawa when he's been healthy, and it certainly has paid off dividends for Boston. And we don't even have the final result in Dean Letourneau from the draft. So, it's you can't be afraid to do it, but you do have to take it in consideration, especially with the piece that you're giving up.
Yep.
Kevin says, I think Freddie can fetch a second, maybe even a late first, Kevin, depending on the team that's given up the draft pick and what else they have. Cam asked what we thought, or our thoughts on Elias Lindholm, which we talked a little bit about him. Do you think he's lost a step?
I don't think he's lost a step. I think my honest opinion is he's been unable to find chemistry with Pastrnak, Zacha, and Marchand. And it's taking him longer to adjust. And whether that's the reason why he hasn't been finding chemistry, I don't know. But that's what I see as the issues.
Yeah. Let's see. Mike adds the core is no longer Pasta, Sway, Mac, Elias and Hampus Lindholm, Zadorov are all signed through the quote unquote core's time here. Not to mention Lorai and Poitras. Who do you consider the core of this team? I know you've said it a couple times, maybe last week. I know we're pretty in sync on this. If you had to pick the core, let's say 5 guys.
My 5?
Yeah.
I guarantee they won't be the same as yours. And I can only pick 5.
The 5 pillars that you're building around going forward, if you had to pick 5.
Oh my God. If I only had to pick 5, Jeremy Swayman.
Yep.
Charlie McAvoy.
Yep.
Hampus Lindholm.
Yep.
Mason Lohrei.
Yep.
And David Pastrnak.
Yep. Those are the 5 I would have picked. The only other one that I would have considered would have been Matthew Poitras, but I wouldn't sacrifice those 5 for him in the sense of building your decor and you have a 100-point producer in Pastrnak. If I can only pick 5, I would say Matthew Poitras would have been my 6th.
Yeah, I have a hard, as big a fan of Poitras as I am, I have a hard time taking out any one of those 4 or 5 to put Poitras in.
Yeah, that's why I would have him as my number 6 guy, that I would do everything and everything I could to not have to move on from him. Let's see. Kevin says, I have no interest in trading a 28-year-old shutdown defenseman who has the best leadership qualities on the team. He's part of your core. That's the start of rebuild territory if you trade Carlo. Again, Kevin, if it's done in the offseason and the right move is made, not necessarily, but midseason, I think it absolutely sends that. Court says the guys you trade are Frederick, Koepke, Brazeau. If you're not making the playoffs, you try and move Korpisalo, but no one is taking him. Probably closer to the draft, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I do agree with David here. He said if the Bruins didn't lose 6 in a row, we'd be second in the Atlantic. But the problem, David, is you did lose those 6 in a row. So now you have to play better than the teams behind you. And as Court says, the Bruins need the rest of the teams behind them to play 500 hockey, and they need to win at least 22 games. So it's you're not just in control of your own destiny. Someone else has a part in it. So you do have, as much as you have a chance, you need a little bit of help here. Let's see. Kevin says, I don't think he's lost a step. I think he's lost his mind in that room. Kevin says, Swayman, Pasta, McAvoy, Carlo, and Lori. Okay. Do you think there could be a 3-team trade between Colorado, Pittsburgh, and Boston? I don't know what that deal would entail or what it would look like. So I'm not sure. Maybe there could be, but again, without seeing what the details of that would look like, I don't know. No, David, Coyle would not be in my top 5. Bruins Meat says Coyle would be his first trade. Keep getting a lot of comments about trading all the UFAs, including Marchand. Some say not Marchand. The only way you're trading Brad Marchand is if he says that he wants out. I think that's the only way you can. I mean, he's the team's cap. Teams don't just trade their captain for the shits and giggles of it just because his contract's expiring. They just don't do that. If Bruins did trade with Vegas, who on their roster is a player you'd want coming your way? I can think of a large number of players on their roster I want coming this way, but what are we giving them? That would be the question.
I think it's in reference to Marchand.
Possibly. That would be the context that makes the most sense, but
I will say this. Vegas is not afraid to deal, and they're not afraid to pay the price.
No, and making that type of phone call, don't trade so-and-so without talking to us first, absolutely a move they would make.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely a phone call they would 100% make. So I wouldn't be surprised, and although I'm sure you probably won't tell us confirming or denying any of the 31 teams that they could be that had possibly said that. So
I said Western Conference contenders, so that's not 31
16
teams.
I apologize.
15. Chicago's not a contender.
14. Anaheim's not a contender.
Neither is San Jose. 13.
Neither is San Jose. I'm not sure I'd consider St. Louis a contender, but I'm sure St. Louis fans would beg to differ.
What's their record since Montgomery?
It's roughly similar to what we have with Sacco. They are 50 points, but they are 5 points behind Calgary for the second wild card. But, and I know how much we said it earlier, games in hand only matter if they're won. Calgary has the 3 extra games to play. So with the 5-point lead, they have to lose those out. Let's see. Cam says, any college guys you would see the Bees signing that would be able to stick at the NHL level this year?
No. None.
Not this year.
I'm assuming Cam means free agents. I don't see any.
Yeah, I not unless this team completely sells off and there's someone they really, really like, but even then, I wouldn't say so. Court adds, Marchand is only willing to go to a very few select teams if he chooses to. So now the speculation is going to be whether or not he wants to.
If I was Marchand, I'd say no. I'm committed to this team, and um, you know, I want to see it through, and the Bruins should be willing to accept that.
Yeah, 100%. Ian says, do you think Marchand and Crosby could go to Colorado? Also, what do you think a return could be for both? No. Crosby does not sign a 3-year contract extension in Pittsburgh to not stay in Pittsburgh. He is staying in Pittsburgh. Marchand would be the one to move. I don't see Marchand wanting to leave every bit as much as Crosby's not looking to leave Pittsburgh. So, and could they both go? No. Could one of them? Highly unlikely. What would the return be? Not what Colorado would be willing to pay. Because now they're paying 2 teams to try to make something happen. It just wouldn't make sense. Michael wants to know your thoughts on Brett Howden. I want to say he's with the Knights. I think he's a defenseman with them.
Yeah. Don't know where he fits on this team, if that's what you're asking. I'm not even sure that the Bruins would want to target him, to be honest with you. Other than that, I got not much to say about it.
I mean, yeah, he's. I'm trying to pull him up real quick. Or no, he's a forward, 26 years old. Yeah, he just signed a new 3-year deal that kicks in next year. At 26, I don't see him being moved. They need guys who stick around on the cheap, and $2.5 million for him for 3 years is a solid deal for Vegas. So I don't see them moving on from that kind of player. Like him as a player, but as Dom said, I'm not quite sure where he's going to fit in here that he would want to leave Vegas to a point where they're getting enough back to make it worth it.
I guess he wouldn't be a Brad Marchand replacement, but he could be a better option than Trent Frederick. It's just I just don't see the fit and what the deal would be.
Yeah. Cam says, do you think Marchand would accept a trade at the deadline as a rental and then re-sign in the offseason? Could that help net a good return? I've heard this theory floated out there quite a bit. And not just for Marchand, for plenty of other players who are pending UFAs. How often do we see it?
I think it's happened once.
That's my point. It just doesn't happen. And if you're acquiring Brad Marchand from me and you know that he's going to re-sign with me next offseason, what am I going to get in return that's quality when like you have me over the barrel at that point?
Yeah.
Because you're not dealing like that's a favor that GMs just don't. I'm not going to trade away my captain and say, don't worry, I expect to get him back in the offseason. Go ahead, win the cup with him, show him a good time for 6 months, win the cup with him, and then he's just going to re-sign with me anyway. It just, yeah, it doesn't happen. Good question here from Michael. I noticed that it is 8:00, which blew my mind because I didn't realize it's already gone that late. But I do like this question from Michael to kind of round things out here. He says, Dom, how do you personally go about building relationships with team scouts? Is it simply because you find yourself at the same rinks and get to chatting?
Basically, that's it. And look, hockey people like nothing better than to discuss hockey.
As so you can tell from our weekly show twice a week.
If you're in let's say a media room in London, Ontario, watching and scouting players, and there's a dozen other scouts in there with you, and you start talking this player and that player, they're more than willing to talk to you. Believe me, hockey people love talking hockey. And as you go on, game after game, week after week, year after year, seeing the same people, there comes a time when they start asking you for your opinion. A lot of guys that are NHL scouts now too also started at a lower level. So you knew them when you're communicating with the team. Bob Weddick, for instance, Bruins OHL scout, was a scout for the North Bay Battalion. He was also with OHL Central Scouting for a number of years. So I got to know him long before he ever became an NHL scout. So you build relationships with them. Then you have bad relationships. I mean, I've had some pretty bad ones with Warren Reichel and Bob Bugner of the Windsor Spitfires.
Oh, you mean the team that's blocked you on Twitter?
Yeah. It's just a matter of seeing them in the rinks and talking all the time. You see, excuse me, not only scouts, but you see agents all the time. I have a good rapport with a lot of scouts. I remember back to Tyler Sagan's draft year. I remember sending an email to Mike Liute about one of his players. I had saw him at the rink a couple nights earlier. He gave me his email address. He emailed me back right away and said, Dom, here's my phone number. Call me right away. So I called him right away. He just happened to be on the highway. I forget where. Going to see another one of his players. So, excuse me. It's about building trust and building relationships that, they get to the point where they'll say something like, Dom, don't put this out there, but Team A is in discussions with trading my player to Team B.
Yeah. To your point, hockey people like talking hockey. There's a scout for a team that I've had conversations with, and we were, exchanging messages, just kind of chatting about stuff. And then he did something similar, said, hey, give me your number. I want to call you so we can have a better conversation. And we've had a number of conversations on some guys. He gave me some information on the Miller situation a while back. Stuff I'm not putting out there. But another name that I went to him and asked about, which he confirmed, is, we're talking about Korpisalo. Keep an eye on Spencer Knight down with the Florida Panthers. They don't have very many tradable assets, and he's a very good young goaltender whose contract comes up in 2 years. And there are plenty of teams that need starting goaltenders. So if I've been told they inquired about Trent Frederick. They weren't excited to pay that kind of price for what Frederick is, but that's the type of player they're looking for. What they want in a player is what people think Trent Frederick is. So, could there be a deal there? Again, it all comes down to the right fit, but just having confirmation on thoughts that I'm having, I'll get on the phone with them and we'll talk for 3 hours unintentionally. So it really is about those relationships. So with that, though, I know we've got almost 500 plus people watching here at this point. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank our friends over at Ice Shaker. Check them out at iceshaker.com. Again, we will be doing a giveaway either next week or the week after for a Bruins ice shaker. One thing that I will say to whoever does win it, please write some sort of review that we can post. You can DM it, you can email it, whatever. I swear by mine, and by giving one away, I hopefully we can get one of our listeners to attest to how much they enjoy theirs as well. With that, Kevin wants to know who the Bruins are going to acquire at the 2028 trade deadline. And
2028?
Yeah. He wants you to look into that crystal ball that you have.
2028. Give me 1 second.
Why did I know you'd have some name? Or at least be able to pull one up.
2028.
Yeah, and as Kevin points out, time flies when you're having good conversation. Absolutely. And as much as we debate and all that stuff, it's all in good fun, as long as you can take it all the right way.
2028, they're going to trade for Maxim Giracolo.
What if they already have him, though?
They don't. That's who they're trading for.
I thought that might be what he was coming up with, too. So, anyways, with that, it is almost 8:10 here in the East. And, Dom, I know we both got some stuff to go take care of. With that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, tomorrow we will be going over all of the prospects. So tune in 6:30 Eastern. The link is already up. Go to YouTube, subscribe to us. You can also tune in.
We have good highlights.
We have great highlights. We also will be on X again tomorrow. So however you're watching tonight's, you can watch tomorrow's as well. Bring all your questions on all the prospects. And with that, all I've got left is go Bees.